Oh, there we are. Can you hear me now? Yeah, I just realized I was recording something with OBS a little while ago and I had the microphone turned off. Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we are. Can you hear me now?
Oh, now I can hear me. That's not good. Quiet, you. Nobody likes
Yeah,
you.
I just realized I was recording something.
There we go. Okay. We'll have to figure out how to trim that later. Well, anyways, we know it works, so brilliant. There. Okay. So this is a little bit impromptu. It's not something I usually do. I haven't done a stream in a little while. Everybody is quitting today. What on earth? But this was just something I wanted to talk about. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to go about it. I do know roughly what I want to cover, roughly. And I don't know, we'll see. If this ends up being a train wreck, I'll just private it afterwards. But is anyone familiar, and this isn't going to be the subject of the whole stream, but is anybody familiar with the recent drama involving Demon Mama and RGR, Twitch streamers, sort of YouTube personalities? I don't know if RGR is mostly on YouTube or Twitch. I think she's mostly on Twitch. What topics did Vosh and Destiny debate? This isn't actually about a debate that Vosh and Destiny had. What I'm interested in tonight, what I want to talk about, is not a particular event in which Vosh and Destiny took part in. And I'm not even particularly interested in the personalities of Vosh and Destiny themselves here. There was a little, I guess this was a bit, this wasn't quite clear enough. When you look at the title of this stream, I didn't just combine Vosh and Destiny into one word. I sort of I did that thing where it's a letter from an imposter, you know? So I guess that's a rough way to introduce what I wanted to talk about. We can just use it, I suppose. Vosh and Destiny are interesting because they represent, interesting for my purposes here, because they seem to represent one of two basic paths that more or less any streamer on the left politically needs to take in order to be successful right now. And they are distinct, and there are some perverse effects of this. So that's sort of what I wanted to sort of think through sort of in real time with this. And maybe that's a stupid way to use my time, but there it is. That was a very bad move. So I'll ask questions like non-related to this afterwards. If anybody wants to suggest any relevant subject matter, not relevant subject matter, but if anybody wants to suggest anything that would be worth covering with respect to this topic, feel free to say that. But yeah, so we'll go for like an hour, and then when we reach that point, I'll either take questions or we'll just, call it a night. Why can't I do that? Oh, because it's not my turn. That's why. That makes sense. All right. So I guess we should just jump right into it. So I had a stream a little while ago that is now privated. It's privated for a very specific reason. But I had a little stream a little while ago in which myself, Jelma Bayorn, who's a good friend of the channel and a good friend personally, and Booksmarts, actually, had a conversation pertaining to the debate that will live forever in infamy between VaUsTiNy and Demon Mama, who, because I don't want to say the phrase Demon Mama over and over again, I will just refer to as DM from here on in. And my experience of that debate, because I had watched it about 3 times by the time we had actually come to discuss it with Booksmart. So I invited on because he had done like a 7-hour stream talking about the debate. He seemed fairly reasonable, a little bit self-indulgent, but it's the gig. And on the final viewing, which was when we finally did the stream, I noticed that my perception of the debate had changed radically. So my memory of that debate is what initially was what most people remember from that debate, and that was DM coming in with some perfectly reasonable critiques of VaUsTiNy, consisting mostly in the fact that he has an immense amount of reach and influence, and so if he signals to anyone that, even like on a superficial level, that a certain form of disparagement is appropriate for him, it seems to give license to a very large number of people to do the same, and that can be extremely overwhelming, and indeed very damaging, depending on the individual in question. I don't think the individual in question was actually particularly damaged. I could be wrong, but the example doesn't particularly matter. The principle sort of stands. It's sort of like there's a difference between an individual throwing a punch at somebody on the subway and a state declaring war. It's still bad. The individual is still just as culpable, but there are other considerations. And, of course, VaUsTiNy's response to that was somewhat lackluster. But what was interesting is that on first viewing, my memory of it was of Demon Mama of DM, sorry. I just hate saying Demon Mama. It's just, it causes me to mess up my words. But my memory of it initially was of her constantly interrupting and sort of gish-galloping VaUsTiNy throughout the entire thing, so that even if his responses to her concerns, which were valid, weren't good, it still reflected very poorly on her and was just absolutely obnoxious to deal with, and bordered on abusive toward VaUsTiNy. So that was a separate issue from the validity of her point, and was a problem. And then I watched it again with Jelma, and I mean parts of it with Jelma, and eventually with Booksmarts as well. And I saw that my memory was incorrect. Now, she was very aggravating. She was speaking very rudely, very loudly. But was there a great deal of interruption? No, not really. It was about the same as... It was about the same on both sides. Now, was her mode of attack generally fair? No, but it wasn't as bad as I remembered it, and it wasn't as bad as most people seemed to be remembering it. But it took a few viewings for me to get to that point. Now, obviously, VaUsTiNy had the same memory I did. I have no doubt it was a lot worse, given that he was the person under attack. And yeah, Vil Van Gogh. So her main concern was making a splash in the debating community. Yeah, I agree with that. There was a cynical motive there. The goal was to pick a fight with a large streamer, one of the large streamers. It couldn't be Vosh because Vosh made her. And to get enough outrage or interest, either or doesn't really matter. To get enough outrage or interest to grow her channel quickly. And it worked. But she's not all cynical. Not all of that was a calculated move. I'm sure she described it to herself after the fact as a calculated move when it started to backfire. But we've been observing something recently with respect to this person. With respect to a lot of people, I think, that are just a lot more subtle about it. But so there were a few other debates following that. The one that, frankly, bores me to tears, but after the Destiny debate, DM had a debate, quote-unquote, extended conversation with some random Twitch streamer called the Scrub King. I don't know or care about this person, but apparently at some point during the conversation, well, not apparently, I saw it. There were moments in the conversation which I don't recollect with 100% certainty in light of what I just was talking about. I'm a little bit loath to assume that I remember it with 100% clarity, but as I recall it, there were moments where the conversation would be proceeding amicably and boringly. And so Demon Mama would attempt to sort of force some kind of friction, whether by making some really unseemly implication against the Scrub King or what have you. And apparently at some point, she more or less characterized him as an incel. So, that's one. And then following that, of course, Destiny had a reaction. I forget the exact context, but he was on stream watching the Scrub King debate, mocking Demon Mama, deservedly. She was extremely disrespectful and cruel to these people for very cynical reasons, let's be honest. Not only cynical reasons, but I'll get to that. And at the end, he invited her on and proceeded to mock her viciously. It wasn't a fantastic look, but it was deserved. I wouldn't say it was a good thing that Destiny did, but it was not undeserved, let's say that. She had something coming. I don't know if it was that in particular, but you know, she threw the first punch. Wow, thank you, Mateo, for the $15. I don't know what infrared means, but infrared apparently. Yeah, so that was funny, I suppose. And then most recently, a couple days ago, I think, my timeline's a little bit sketchy. I thought it had happened like yesterday or something. But Demon Mama had I was under the impression that she and RGR, who was that? Riley Grace Rochon? Riley Grace Rochon, yeah. They had appeared together in other things. I had assumed that they were on fairly good terms. They had an amicable relationship. And something kind of interesting happened. So the discussion they had, I don't think it was just on the title of the video itself, but it was... Let me see if I can actually just bring it up directly. It was What is a Woman, I believe. So, I don't want to get into the weeds about that. I'm not an expert on philosophy of gender or anything of that sort. What interested me about this was that with somebody with whom she has not only common cause, but one would imagine a very strong ethical impetus to be charitable towards. We'll put you in check. DM resorted to exactly the same kind of, I almost don't like calling them tactics. As she had deployed against Destiny and the Scrub King. And maybe other people I'm not aware of. But yeah. And this seemed to, I don't know, this told me something. People have been really, really harsh on DM for this. And I get why. It is a very, very difficult sort of thing to be generous towards. And maybe it's inappropriate to be generous towards it. I've spoken to her in person on her server. One-on-one, I don't think she's a terrible person. My general sense is that this is a very, very insecure person. I'm just speculating. But this is honestly my impression. And I think she's insecure for, bluntly, not an invalid reason. As far as I'm aware, DM's income is now tied to her streaming career. Okay. DM made her initial splash having that big debate with Destiny. She owes a tremendous amount to both her debate with Destiny and to whatever friendship she and Vosh and his girlfriend have, who are also, of course, extremely antagonistic towards Destiny. I believe Vosh's girlfriend was involved in getting him banned off Twitch. I haven't looked into the details, but I did see a thing to that effect on Reddit. Whatever, but the point is, there are practical reasons for why she would feel compelled to compelled to force certain kinds of interaction. Because when you look at the appeal of people like Destiny and Vosh, what do? Well, they sit in front of their computer. They'll read the internet, basically. And they will have an emotional reaction that you can sort of imagine yourself having. That you sort of imagine yourself having. Oh, that's sort of my speech, I can't really tell. So, yeah, guys, don't donate to this. I'm just sort of thinking in real time, so this is going to be a little bit rough, but yeah. So I try to put myself into her headspace. I do this extraordinarily casually, and it takes a lot of time. When you make a video essay, it takes I would say about for every 20 minutes, it takes about an hour and a half of work. And these are really rough, the stuff that I make. When these people who do political Twitch streaming do this, they are spending upwards of 5 hours a day just streaming, just talking. And the sole qualification for doing so is that they have a webcam, a computer, and time. And that's about it. I think Vosh has like the most successful ones, I think Vosh has a sociology degree, if I'm not mistaken. And I think VaUsTiNy was a carpet cleaner, if memory serves. Nothing wrong with either of those things, and nothing about that precludes you from having extremely interesting and insightful takes on current events and like important ethical issues and whatnot. But that's it. There's no vetting process. Demon Mama didn't become a streamer because she in any way practiced for it or went to school for it, or she may have gone to film school, I can't quite remember. But she's just a random person who saw some people being cool on the internet and decided to imitate it. And that's what most of these people are doing. And I think there's something really bad about that. And the reason I think there's something really bad about that is because VaUsTiNy and Vosh represent a way to extraordinary wealth with none of them apparently. Oh, VaUsTiNy went to music college. Yeah, right. Right. He talks about that. That makes sense. I don't know. I don't pay that much attention to these guys' personal lives. It's a path to success without having to go into the labor force, without having to, I suppose, prostitute yourself out in some sort of way. I mean that in sort of a colloquial sense. Maybe that's something I shouldn't say. But, you know, like it's a creative, career path where you sort of get to keep your humanity, or so it seems. You get to discuss important issues. You get to be sort of a part of history. You get to be seen. I think it's a big one. And I think it particularly appeals to people who, and not necessarily, of course, there are exceptions, but I think it particularly appeals to people for whom long sorts of projects, like, for example, making a contribution to an academic field, that takes a lot of time. It's very hard. And the rewards are not good, often. You're worked to death. You'll probably die in anonymity. Not all the time. I have some hope for some people I know, but it's no promise. Or any other sort of thing, starting a business. North America is a great place to live in a lot of ways. There's some beautiful geography and whatnot, but like, let's take, for example, I live in British Columbia, supposedly a garden city. Here's something nobody ever seems to talk about in terms of the sheer cruelty of things like gentrification and wealth inequality in practice. I live on an island. It's gorgeous. You have the ocean in all directions. You can't see that almost everywhere you go because the hedges of expensive houses block... Oh, that was stupid. Why'd you do that? Block your view of the sea. So you know that line from the opening of Firefly, "You can't take the sky from me"? Well, they did. So I don't blame people at all for wanting to escape from that and do something exciting. I think there's something actually kind of admirable about the venture, but... And Music Combo says, is it necessarily bad that left-wing advocates are coming from diverse backgrounds and studies? No, not at all. I'm going to get into that, though, because it's not... The issue isn't that advocates are coming from diverse backgrounds and studies. The issue is that, specifically, insecure and desperate, which I may include myself to a certain degree, desperate people, find this particular mode of, I'm not even sure advocacy is the word, because I don't think it's really motivated by ultimately a desire to do advocacy in most people. I could be wrong. Hopefully I am. But I'm just saying what this looks like to me, and that's all I have at the end of the day. This is ultimately a racket. And as far as I can ascertain, the grand result of, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. It seems to me like people like Demon Mama, people who have really no form of preparation except for grooming by, not in like a sinister sense, but like grooming by other people who have succeeded in the area, in this case Vaush and his girlfriend, for how to sort of navigate these extremely treacherous waters. This is as dangerous ultimately as being a politician. Your face is out there. You can be permanently embarrassed by this, by your activities online, which is why I'll never show my face willingly. Oh, foolish child. I'm actually probably playing very terribly. I'm very distracted right now, but yeah, there we go. That's it. Yoink. These people don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're getting into. All they know is that they've seen people perform in specific ways to tremendous applause, and gaining tremendous wealth in the process. And so they ape those behaviors, either with more or less competence. And the more mature and independent and, for whatever, robust the person is, the easier that, the better the outcome. So, I mean, for example, Demon Mama has been criticized for copying Vaush's mannerisms. And I mean, like, okay, she kind of does, but like, Vaush copies Destiny's mannerisms, more or less. It's very similar. And to a certain extent, we all copy someone's mannerisms. This isn't like a grand condemnation. The fact that somebody has adopted the social tools of somebody else. We all do it. There's a difference, though. You can tell that Vaush, just judging by his personality, you can tell he was independent from a very young age. He's like 26 right now. He acts like he's 35. Same with Destiny, although I guess he is, what is he, like 34, 32? Somewhere around there. I don't know exactly how old DM is. I think she's 30. But, okay. So, if there's some sort of, like, robust content there, by which I mean, like, if the individual in question has more going on than just maybe a natural stage presence or drive, then it ultimately doesn't matter that they're imitating the form of somebody else, because they're using the form of that other person to present something that's them. They're not compromising themselves for the sake of imitating the success of somebody else. They're using the tools of somebody else who is successful to make their own success. I'm not impugning anybody for doing this, but like, what I noticed with Demon Mama in the debate with RGR, which I don't even think was a debate originally, I think it was just a conversation. What I noticed was that, I mean, RGR, let's be clear here, if anybody watched that discussion, was honestly, like, it didn't merit the response she got from DM, but it was condescending. It was very condescending. It was annoying to watch. But there were points in that conversation where DM reflexively went into a mode. And I don't have the video before me, but the context, especially in times that she raised her voice or attempted to shut down the conversation in a particular way, the context seemed to be when she would be sort of at a loss for words or out of her depth, which is fair. Like, this is, I mean, it doesn't matter that you're trans. This stuff is, like, not generally talked about by most people in the way RGR was talking about it. But she needed to be in command in a particular way, and her understanding of what being in command of a interaction was to be acting out events in which people like Destiny and Vosh had taken part, and in which they had sort of dominated over the people they were discussing with. So what people have accused DM in particular, I'm focusing on DM just because she's a particularly bad example, but what DM seems to do, and what she seemed to do in that discussion, was when things wouldn't go her way or what she thought her way was in that discussion, she would attempt to, almost like acting out a skit. She would sort of assume a context that wasn't present, but she would try to act it out in order to, I don't know, like, sort of encapsulate the interaction and then kind of close it. By which I mean, this is actually harder to put into words than I thought. Okay, so here's an example. Actually, this is funny because this is what RGR was doing as well. I think she's also an example of this. At one point during the conversation, what did DM at? Right. So DM had said to RGR, "You're literally sounding like Destiny right now." And then, like clockwork, RGR responded, "Wait, what?" That's like a super hyper fast version of what I'm talking about. But what is that "wait, what" doing? It's arresting the flow of the conversation. It's putting the other person on the back foot. Now they have to go back, change their tone, and explain what they meant. And they have to explain what they meant clearly. And because of that response, especially if this person has managed to sort of cultivate the goodwill of the audience or has a larger audience than the visitor or the other interlocutor, then yeah, you've successfully portrayed this person as, in some sense, unprepared or out to lunch. And if you're doing that to a friend, who I was under the impression RGR was with respect to DM, that's extraordinarily provoking. And of course, she was quite upset afterwards, quite visibly upset. That wasn't an act. She was almost in tears from frustration and stress. And I don't blame her for it one bit. It's a perfectly reasonable reaction to that. It was a kind of betrayal. You know, it's like Machiavelli said: if you will receive kindness from someone you expect ill from massively better than from someone you already expect kindness from, and the reverse is also true. If you are slighted by a friend, especially in this particular context where there are real personal stakes, people can have their reputations ruined by this platform, you're going to react very poorly. So, okay. So what's the overall problem here? It's not, oh, poor Demon Mama. It's not, oh, poor RGR. It's not Destiny and Vosh bad. Although I will say this. The one thing I'm going to impugn anybody... Well, two things. So with respect to Demon Mama in particular, I think Destiny's continued predation on the person at this point, when it seems to be clear that this person is reflexively engaging in these behaviors and doesn't seem to have the ability to, there's no off switch. It seems to be a thing that she feels she has to do. And she's now monetarily tied to continuing to do this, or so it seems. Frankly, I think she'd be better off not doing it. I think a lot of us would be better off not doing it. That's why I don't. He does have a massive audience. Massive. And in my opinion, at least, I think that continuing to put a target on this person's back is cruel. I think she should stop. I think something needs to be done, because she is being cruel herself to other people, including RGR. Most recently RGR, I should say. But the repercussion for what is ultimately, I don't know, it seems disproportionate to me. That's one thing. Now, I would tend to forgive this for the simple reason that Destiny himself was directly slighted, and I think he has a particular reason, given the nature of the accusations, or I should say, given the nature of the portrayal DM attempted to make of Destiny in front of a massive audience. He's justified in being angry and responding in kind, to a certain extent. I think at this point it's disproportionate, but I get where he's coming from. There's nothing particularly diabolical about what he's doing. Vosh, on the other hand, nobody's talking about this, but Vosh has done something extremely cruel with respect to DM. Vosh and his girlfriend Hyena are principally responsible, as far as I can tell, for boosting DM's reach such that she has the audience and the reach that she has. They didn't do all the work, but they did a lot of it. They continue to plug her material, or have until recently. I haven't seen anything too recent. And Vosh has even graced her channel. Now, it seems innocent and everything, but currently, DM's Discord is locked, or Twitter is locked. I think she's basically on full lockdown mode because people in that sphere have started an understandable, have had a very strong reaction to her behavior, which RGR and Destiny have telegraphed to the world. What has Vosh or Hyena, what have they said concerning any of this? I think with respect to Vosh, the only thing I've seen is he offered some advice for debating in the future after the Destiny stream. But at this point, it seems like there's not even a word. Not a word to Destiny to like lay off. This is a younger, less experienced streamer who's quite likely going to be seriously harmed by this. It seems like she's been hung out to dry. She's been lured into the frying pan and left to sizzle. And I see no end to it, because this is how she makes her money now. And that's not a slight. That's not saying, oh, she's just cynically interested in making money. No. No, this is how she makes her money now. Which means she needs this. Which means stopping is not so easy. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. Now, I don't think most people have as poor judgment as DM does. Talking to her and people in her sphere, my general impression, once I calm down, because they are talented in how aggravating they can be, was that these people had no idea about how to actually navigate a situation in which you are in a massive PR war with somebody who massively outranks and outguns you. VaUsTiNy can telegraph his own of DM much more easily than DM can telegraph anything she says. And again, I'm not saying VaUsTiNy wasn't fair here, because she kind of asked for it. Like, if you walk down the sidewalk spinning your fists, don't be surprised when, somebody hits back. Yeah. It's kind of awful. It really is. Because what are people rewarded for doing as a result of this? Well, DM now owes her bread and butter to being obnoxious to specific people. Not to doing good work, not to strong advocacy, not to constructive projects, but simply just being a circus clown, essentially. And I don't think she wanted to be a circus clown. I think she saw people like Vosh and VaUsTiNy engaging in serious conversations. I don't know if they're having any actual effect in the real world. I'm actually increasingly pessimistic about that. But doing something that seems on the surface to be meaningful. And she wanted to do that herself. And the way in which she has more or less been trained into thinking you do that is by identifying some high-profile person with an audience, riling them up, and yeah. All she knew how to do was run into a field with a bunch of bulls with a red cape. I mean, there's a few other things I could go on about. There's a host of toxic things going on with left-wing YouTube, I suppose, generally. I don't know. doesn't seem to be any actual concern in this community with anybody actually building up their followers and making them better. As far as I can tell, nobody actually cares about any of the people involved in this. They are just as likely to eat each other as anything else, really. In fact, maybe they're more likely to eat each other than anything else, simply because that pays dividends. I'm not gonna break out a Lacanian psychoanalysis on someone because I haven't read Lacan. That'd be funny though. Alright, someone's asking me questions. I'll take a look. Do I think there is a financially secure way of advocating left-wing politics online, particularly through streaming without drama? Well, there is some of that already out there, I suppose. I don't know. I really don't know. Okay, here's a question. Like, what was... So I think we all agree that... I'm assuming that most people, the people in my audience are going to agree that... there are worse things that could have happened this year than Rush Limbaugh dying. There, that seems to be a general way of putting that. What has been the general reaction of left-wing YouTube to the death of Rush Limbaugh? I don't want to get into whether or not it's justified to laugh at a person after they're dead. First of all, because, I mean, let's be totally honest here, it's extraordinarily difficult to make that case with respect to Rush, who did that himself for money for a very long time. But I suppose what I wonder is, what kinds of things is that training us to do? Like, is that a thing we should be sort of comfortable doing? Like, here's a question. When was the last time someone like VaUsTiNy, or anyone in that sphere, told their audience, hey, this is a thing that we individually need to work on to be better people? Maybe there was something, I can't remember. Or did they, when was the time that they ever gave advice to do anything other than you know, how to become a successful streamer like me, with always the caveat, don't do it for money because you won't make any. No, my queen's dead. I shouldn't play chess during streams. I'll continue to do so anyways, but I really shouldn't. They haven't. They don't. I mean, realistically, they don't care. It's a racket. They make money selling drama. They'll fall back on the exact same excuse Sargon has. They're entertainers. Which they are. Which I suppose is fair. Ugh. See, white won. It just gets worse and worse. Vosh fought with a chat the other day about something discipline and the virtue of valuing hard work. No, I didn't see that. I've stopped watching Vosh for the most part. I like Vosh personally, but Has anybody here read Plato's Republic? There's a, I forget which book it's in, but there's a part where he describes, what is he describing? Not a statesman. He's describing like a demagogue or something. You know, not the kind of person who acts for the good of his community, but somebody who knows how to manipulate his community for personal gain. I'm not saying that Vosh or Destiny are this. Destiny in particular, I actually think, like, here's the thing. Politically, I disagree with Destiny a lot more than I do with Vosh. I think Destiny's honestly a lot more sincere than Vosh is in a lot of ways. I don't think he's better than Vosh. I think he's more sincere. But in any case, Plato's Republic, right. He characterizes the demagogue, we'll just say, because my memory's fuzzy on this, it's been like almost 10 years. He characterizes the demagogue as a beast tamer. So, imagine that there's this multi-headed beast, and it's hungry, it wants to eat you alive. Well, the demagogue as a beast tamer is very good at feeding the beast exactly what it wants to eat at any given time and keeps it pacified and friendly towards it. I'm butchering it, but you get the general idea. I think that's what largely Vosh and Destiny and people in this sphere are conditioned to do, or what they do. I think Destiny, one of the reasons why I think Destiny's more sincere is because, as a function of him sort of being a pioneer with respect to this kind of thing, he didn't imitate anybody else, and he doesn't have to, he's not under the illusion that sort of projecting somebody else's persona will get him success, because that hasn't been his experience. And I think also from the security of his wealth, he just doesn't really care that much. Now, there are downsides to this, in that some of the things he has advocated and done have been callous. But yeah. And I mean, you can kind of see this with, like, I mean, the contrast, it sort of scales up as you go down. So, Vosh will you'll see a lot more cases in Vosh where he has to kind of force a reaction to things. And usually what stands out is that he's responding to something very strongly that's undermotivated. And it's really annoying, actually, but like, he's okay at sort of feigning sincerity a little bit, but you can tell, like, he's relatively more performative than Destiny is. Destiny is also highly performative, but I think it's more of an original act. I think it's more him. But okay. Yeah. So, at the end of the day, it's a money-making racket. It's particularly attractive to poor people for whom this is really their only avenue to any sort of visibility. And visibility is important. It's... I mean, Hannah Arendt regarded it as being, like, I mean, of course she was a romantic, but Hannah Arendt regarded it as being essential to fully actualizing yourself as a human being. All right, it's 10:21. What's the upshot of all this? Okay, let's just make a statement. As a function of their success, a lot of people who don't know better have come under the belief that imitating at a superficial level the behaviors of people like Vosh and Destiny is a path to success and influence. This has two serious negative consequences. One, it degrades the quality of left-wing discourse online, because now everybody is hungrily trying to destroy each other to get those precious views. And two, it's extraordinarily harmful to those people who have to engage in that. These are people who are vulnerable. These are often people who have no idea of how to exit once they've gone in. Like, what's Demon Mama going to do after this if she ever wants to? Like, if she, like, the conversations she's had with Destiny, with RGR, with, I mean, imagine like the source of your public humiliation is a conversation with someone called the Scrub King. It's awful. Like, how does she get out of this? This is now there forever. People have downloaded this. They've uploaded it. She's put her face out there. Like, if someone like me, if I say something stupid, I can just close my channel and this all goes away. I mean, even if somebody successfully doxed me because my face isn't on here, it's like I'm basically scot-free. But for these people, I mean, putting your face up seems to be a condition of success as well. If you don't do that, then you don't have, you know, that parasocial, you don't have that relatableness. You're not a person anymore. Like, when I speak right now, like I can take long pauses and it's just dead air. Demon Mama can make faces. That's a superpower in this sphere. She can fill air without saying anything. And that's something that needs to be addressed, because I think what's going on here is something really, really bad. Because at the end of the day, what we're effectively looking at is a bunch of people who are, in a certain respect, not entirely, but in a certain respect, mentally or sometimes literally children, who have seen somebody do something cool on the internet as a job and make a lot of money, and they thought, oh, I want to do that. And these people are being fed to the wolves. And I just lost my queen. Oh, but he's stupid, so I still lost my queen. Oh, the pit of it all. What do I want to do there? So, okay. So what needs to happen? Well, I can't make anything happen. If you want me to talk about Hegel, any prescription we're going to make is going to be entirely one-sided. It's my primary issue with a lot of socialists online, is that they don't understand that the conditions that make your prescriptions impossible aren't just an injustice, they're also a part of the problem that you need to address. Otherwise, you're not talking about the real world. Oh, screw it, this game sucks anyways. I lost like 50 points tonight. Yeah, so we need to recognize that there's a situation right now where especially vulnerable people, not just cynical and hungry people, but vulnerable people who don't know any better, who have few prospects, they've got nothing going on, they're young, they're impressionable. I mean, some of them are not so young, but like, we can't be stupid, right? Like, sometimes like, people can be perfectly normally intelligent, or even like very intelligent, and still just by dint of a lack of experience or a lack of a particular kind of experience not know how to navigate a particular sphere. And this one is especially treacherous. And I think we need to recognize that there are a lot of people who are getting into this who don't really know what they're doing. I don't mean don't know what they're doing as they don't know how to stream or they don't know how to like put on a good show. I think unambiguously Demon Mama has a very powerful stage presence. She could be very good. But people are getting into this. They're having their reputations destroyed, or what they think their reputations are getting destroyed. At the end of the day, most people don't even know who Vosh is. And he's easily the biggest. I think he's competing with Destiny right now for the biggest. I think they're both at about 338. thousand, if I'm not mistaken. Um, we need to start thinking of these people as uh, people like anybody else who ostensibly, like if we're left-wingers and we actually care about the well-being of people, especially of poor and vulnerable people, or the well-being of people who are, in whatever sense, trying to engage positively in a career advocating for a better world in whatever respect. Right now, like, we're treating these people like toilet paper in a whirlpool, or I guess just paper in a toilet bowl. You know, we're just throwing them to the dogs, and sometimes we're the ones eating them. I feel like one of the major upshots of the success of people like VaUsTiNy and Vosh, and the particular kind of content that they engage in, is that the left wing online has started to become increasingly less cruel in aesthetic and increasingly cruel in substance. In that there's a mass amount of attention to don't use slurs, don't attack people for things that are, first of all, not crimes, and secondly, not things that they can control. Don't be bigoted towards people. Don't advocate for removing people things they need to basically survive, especially if it does nothing whatsoever to disadvantage you. But we're perfectly fine, so it seems, with having a bunch of young people ruin each other for no reason, for pennies on the hour. I should probably look at questions, because I see that the most recent one is by Music Combo saying, I know I keep saying this, and I honestly don't know, because I've been watching my chessboard, not watching you. So let's look at this. I should have said this in advance. So how I like to do this on this channel is I don't like to require people to pay money to ask questions. So put an asterisk next to a question if you have one. There are a lot more people watching this tonight than usually. I guess I did a good job on the thumbnail. So if you have a question, restate it, put an asterisk next to it. I will try to get through a few of them. I don't know if I'll be able to get through them all, but yeah. That's it. So Music Combo asks, I know I keep saying this, or not ask. That is a question. I know I keep saying this, but I really think this is an important point. Ever since 2016 era YouTube, people have wanted the left wing to have quote-unquote teeth. How do we do that healthily? I think that's mistaken. I think that the right wing dominated YouTube because they portrayed a kind of superficial appearance of strength that had to do with not caring what people say with respect to ethical pressure, to not use slurs, to limit the kinds of things that you say, things like that. And like you look at people like Sargon referring to people as, well, like, I don't know if I can even say this without getting banned, a slur involving, the first half of the word is like Mongol, let's say, or saying stupid things like, I wouldn't even, what was that politician's name? I can't remember, but that thing he got famous for, he wouldn't even rape so-and-so. Like, oh, it's like super based. That's not strength. And it's not really teeth either, because at the end of the day, I don't think it really accomplished a whole lot. I think it made some people feel good for a brief span of time because they were annoyed by overbearing college activists harassing people at rallies, which, as far as I can tell, seems to be more or less the worst of their complaints at the end of the day. Teeth would be being right, being concise, and being appealing. And not just appealing to people who are desperate for vengeance against somebody that, I mean, who's already on side with you and just wants to see somebody take down somebody who's aggravating to them. I think we need to up our standards. I think the biggest weakness of the left wing online has been an absolute lack of standards and an absolute elevation, not an absolute elevation, but the elevation of a cheap facsimile, the same cheap facsimile of sort of manliness, quote unquote, but like that kind of verbal toughness that people like Sargon and whatnot pretended to have. It's not good. It doesn't win anybody over. Now, with exceptions. So, who was that? So, Destiny and Vosh did a tag team debate a little while ago. It was against, it was Red something. Some fashy guy, not particularly smart, as you might expect. And at one point, tones were rising, and Vosh yelled at him. And you could hear this guy's voice shake. And you know what? I think that's effective. I think making somebody who postures as tough look weak is effective, if the posturing is all the substance that's there. If it's not, you're in a bit of trouble, because now the people who are watching are now really indignant because you've misrepresented them, and now you've put fuel on the fire. Maybe. I don't think it really particularly matters with respect to this particular kind of person. I think it's a bit more of an issue when it's more ambiguous as to like the person's level of ethical depravity. I think in the case, was it Razorback? I think it was Razorback. In the case of someone like Razorback, I think you're probably in the clear. But I think generally, we need to move into a mode where we're capable of explaining things in a way that, well, maybe I'm being naive. I think we need to prize being correct and decent over beating down people whose sole existence is to engage in the kind of activity, how do I want to put that? Instead of beating down people who literally only exist to get into an arena with you and, have something going on. I feel like that's just ultimately, I don't know, I think it's fruitless ultimately, but I don't know. I would like to see more attention to cultivating good behavior and good attitudes in communities, and cultivating really strong, well-researched argumentation and advocacy that way, than just whatever we want to call what Destiny and Vosh and Demon Mama and whoever all these other people, whatever they call themselves, this kind of like, let's get all these weirdos together and just have them kill each other like gladiators. It's just gonna wear them out. It's gonna wear us out. It's gonna make us cruel. And at the end of the day, like, nobody's gonna remember it. And I mean, the same thing goes for the right wing too. Like, does anybody remember like someone like Vernaculus? I think that weird guy Wizard of Cause is still streaming. He has like 5 people on. It's kind of sad. No, it's something crazy. He has like 2 or 3 people on. This guy's been doing this for like decades. I never watch his stuff because I'm not politically aligned with him, and I don't particularly find him that interesting. But he's got a good voice. He's got a good presentation. It's a little bit strange. He used to actually chill with Sargon and whatnot. Music Combo remarks, "This is fair, but I caution against the argument that it's the left wing's fault there are so many fascists because they painted everyone as fascists." No, I don't think it's the left wing's fault there are so many fascists. I do think the rise of Trump, for instance, this is one case. I think there is at least some level of culpability in the bare, and I'm saying this very carefully here, like a very small amount of culpability in the bare fact that when there was a proliferation of cases where people aligning with the values of the left wing generally were being extremely abusive and inappropriate in public, like, look, I'm not an anti-violence person in principle. I think a lot of people who are anti-political violence generally tend to forget the fact that, and here we're talking the abstract right now. A lot of people who are anti-violence in general in politics, as a general rule, forget the fact that there are things resulting in the deaths, the harm and deaths of people already that are being reacted to, that are, of course, the cruel and conscious or negligent, they're the result of the cruelty and the conscious actions and the negligence of actual people. So it's not entirely inappropriate to say that some forms of violence, I'm not talking about like beating people up in the street, but some forms of what could be construed as violence are necessarily universally inappropriate. However, there is a big difference between violence as a practical necessity, as the only thing that can be done to rectify a situation that is already enacting violence. And I'm not talking about things like microaggressions. I'm talking things like putting people into extreme poverty or destroying the homes of let's say, indigenous groups or of what have you. Or of, you can imagine things. Like, we can set the bar however high and low we want. That's a separate argument. The point is, there are conditions that aren't a state of war in which violence can still be warranted, or at the very least excusable, right? That's different from somebody taking it upon themselves to smack one guy, one random person at a rally with a bike lock. And I think that insofar as it was crickets, as far as I could tell from almost all of the major left-wing figures. In fact, even endorsement. My video on PhilosophyTube critiqued him quite strongly on the grounds that, at the time it was written, what this video amounted to was an endorsement of really attempted murder of random people in public by random people. That's another thing. Like, people accuse the right wing of calling every single person who commits acts of violence or vandalism in a crowd as being a member of Antifa. Well, I mean, that can sting both ways. If you you can say that every single one of those are Antifa and that's bad, or every single one of those are Antifa and it's good. It's still, I think I lost the plot of what I was saying. Point is, nobody was actually doing anything to rein in bad behavior on their side, and that was an extremely bad look. And I think that's something that we really need to not do in the future. I think it's had a worse impact than a lot of people think. In my experience as a Canadian, so take it with a grain of salt, that was a major impetus for my sympathy towards the Trump platform way back in the day. Which I don't have anymore, of course, but, like, it's a problem. All right, let's ask some more questions, then I want to go to sleep. Oh, it was Striker, not Razorback. Who's Razorback? Or is Razorback the ship from The Expanse? I think that's where I'm getting that from. I don't know. These people's names all sound the same. Taserface. Alright. The thing I'm always fascinated by is streamers always produce longer content despite less effort. Well, I mean, yeah, like that's the advantage of streaming. If I make a video, I have to write a script. I try to put citations down. I don't always, but I try to put citations down. I have to acquire and assemble imagery. I have to record. And here's something kind of interesting. When you do a stream, your standards go down so that, I mean, I'm probably doing a terrible job right now, but your standards go down so somebody can stutter or hiccup or cough or whatever, and you forgive it because it's real time. It's like chilling with a real person. If I cough in a video essay, you turn it off with good reason, because it's like, wow, I rehearsed this. Yeah, and then of course you can like take your stream, chop it up into bits, put them on YouTube. You've made 3 times the content, and all you've done is just sat down and talked to. Okay, here's something. One thing I really hate about one thing I really like about Destiny and I really hate about Vosh clones, and this is one way in which you can sort of determine who streamers are taking cues from. Destiny looks away from the camera at his computer. Vosh looks at the screen at you and he makes expressions. I just realized I'm doing that reflexively right now. I'm not even on camera. What the hell am I doing? But he does that to his camera. When he does that, he's not looking at a face. These are rehearsed expressions. It's really silly when you think about it. It's effective. I really like that thing he does where he has that cartoonish, he can zoom in when he's like, had it. But I don't know. I'm just scrolling back up. I'm going to see if there's any more questions that are interesting. Sorry this has been so low energy. I am extraordinarily tired. I haven't slept in 2 days. Somebody sent me a super chat for $15. If you have a question, like, besides pictures of gorillas, please do, unless that's implying something untoward. 10 out of 10 breathing ASMR. Yeah, I should just make this an ASMR channel. Just screw politics. This is boring. I'm so glad I'm done Apologetics Month. That was so tedious. It's weird. I used to spend all of my time like engaged in those communities, but I realized I was engaged in those communities arguing with people. Apologetics is so boring. It's so boring. It's like bad, underdetermined philosophy. And the people are just awful. Oh man. Like, thank God at least like it's someone like Vosh and not someone like inspiring philosophy. Oh my God. LNB starred MP says, President Sunday, I cannot believe a grown man like you wasted time on those 2 morons. I believe I wasted time on 3 morons tonight. Do I think Destiny doesn't list his sources? I don't know if Destiny lists his sources, does he? I don't think Destiny usually says stuff that requires a citation, and usually he's pretty good about having like a caveat, like I'm just remembering this or something. Destiny's pretty down to earth. I don't think he's particularly bad for this. I think Destiny generally is pretty solid on a lot of things. I think his major flaw is just that he's callous. He's callous in like a very relatable way though. Like he's callous in a way like I still work blue collar jobs, so I'm used to people talking like that all the time. Like I'm very sympathetic to that way of engaging. But I also recognize like there are serious problems with it, especially when it ends up with you saying things that amount to an apology for, I don't know, like if somebody brings up cultural genocide of indigenous people, it's probably not a great move to start talking about how well they weren't technologically capable of fighting off the Europeans, so I guess they deserve it or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but you know what I mean. Like he's done some stuff that is like, come on. But what are we talking about? We're just kind of wrapping up at this point. It's been on for an hour. It's like 10:46 here, and I'm extraordinarily underslept. So. P.S. not answering my Plotinus question. Okay, let me find your Plotinus question. I haven't read Plotinus, so I probably can't answer it very well. But what do you make of Plotinus's view that the one has eros, i.e., a love, a desire constituted by its own lack towards itself, which is diffused through the cosmos by the forms? A desire constituted by its own lack towards itself. So Plotinus was a Neoplatonist, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken because my specialty is up to the end of the Peloponnesian War. So Plotinus Okay, so the one has eros, a love, a desire. So this would be underdetermined in Greek. So this would be like just a general love, or general, desire, almost simply. Constituted by its own lack. I don't know what that means by its own lack. How does one lack itself? A lack towards itself, which is diffused through the cosmos by the forms. Okay. So I guess the idea is that, are the forms constituted of eros? Does that make sense? I have never read Plotinus, so I'm this is entirely guesswork on my part. What do I make of it? I mean, it sounds really amenable to certain views of the Trinity, I suppose, in Christian theology. But I other than that, like, I'm a complete layperson with respect to this topic. Diogenes, answer mine. Also, I watch a channel called Logic and Philosophy. I'm not familiar with that one. Yeah. Yeah. If anybody asked a question, there are a lot of comments here, and I'm trying to look through them. It's just kind of difficult. So if anybody wants to re-ask them, feel free. Oh, here we go. Sorry. So here's a couple. Diogenes, Diogenes asks, could you recommend any good channels? I follow Kane B, Philosophy Overdose, Richard Brown, Man with Sunglasses, and Gary Edwards. Zanzi on Twitch is actually very good. He has a YouTube channel too, which is criminally undersubbed, which is criminally unknown. But Zanzi's stuff is very good. Cuck Philosophy is okay. I think I like Cuck Philosophy because he's very good at sort of breaking down bad philosophy. He doesn't make a whole lot in the way of positive contributions, which is not like an insult. Like, what he does is valuable, I think. And it's a lot harder to do. And truth be told, I haven't watched all of his stuff, so maybe he has and I just missed it. But Cuck Philosophy is good. It's not even called that anymore. Who else? Let me take a look. Who have I got here? I'll just recommend Spirit Science. No. It's really hard. There's not a lot of good philosophy on YouTube. Or at least it's very obscure. Yeah, I just want to say Cuck Philosophy is probably decent, and like I don't get my philosophy from YouTube at all. Some right-wing channels are kind of interesting just because they go through stuff you'll never read and they go through it seriously. I can't say much for like their interpretive powers, but it's still sort of interesting. I'm not going to recommend anybody just for obvious reasons, but if you're interested in that kind of thing, it's worth giving it a look. But yeah, Zanzi's really good. Zero Books sometimes has interesting stuff. I don't know if Matt McManus is a channel, but if you look him up, he's got some interesting perspectives. Yeah. Zanzi and Chud Logic, though, have some pretty interesting guests, and Zanzi in particular is a fairly well-read and interesting person with some really interesting opinions. So, I mean, I'd highly recommend him, but he's on Twitch. He's also on YouTube, but he's mainly on Twitch. Do you consider... Applad asks, do you consider any ideology or person that calls it themselves right-wing that are more left-wing and vice versa? I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. Do you consider any ideology or person that calls themselves right-wing that are more left-wing and vice versa? Oh, I see. So maybe are there any ideologies that I'm aware of that call themselves right-wing but are in fact more left-wing? I mean, left wing and right wing are kind of impoverished terms. If what you mean is a general inclination toward, let's say, a stereotypically left wing view of justice, maybe. Certain forms of Catholic thought. I couldn't pin down somebody in particular. There are a lot of really toxic right wing Catholics as well. So, like I say that with a grain of with some heavy caveats, but there are some Catholics who are very concerned with social justice and things like that. On the other hand, there are a lot of tankies who are extraordinarily homophobic and extraordinarily transphobic, yada yada yada, and are just really toxic generally and authoritarian. So I don't particularly like them either. Would I say they're therefore right wing or more right wing? Not really. They tend to resemble the stereotypes of what the worst of the right wing are, but I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily say that like they're making a switch, right? I hope that answers your question, sort of. So generally, no, I don't think that's the case. Brendan Peterson asks, what are your thoughts on Destiny's talks with other socialists over Vosh? Sorry, we've already talked about this specifically. I haven't. Destiny's talks with other socialists. I haven't watched them that much in depth, for the simple reason that it seems to me that a lot of socialist YouTubers are kind of missing the big question, or the big questions, which for me don't so much concern policies, although those are important. For me, they concern, okay, and I'm talking about like we're talking about like socialists, qua socialists, not socialists as people who identify as socialists but are just making sort of nudge policy arguments like do this a little bit differently or do this a little bit differently. Talking about people who actually want to restructure the system to actually move into a state of socialism. So besides the fact that the kind of person that I just mentioned, who's making the nudge arguments, is heavily represented and isn't particularly interesting. I think generally a lot of socialist thinkers, especially on YouTube, get kind of hung up on, and I'm speaking off the cuff here, so I'm not trying to like disparage anybody, but in my limited observation, they get hung up on historical injustices or ongoing injustices and sort of like the wrongs of capitalism or the problems involved in capitalism, things like that. While at the same time not being particularly attentive to the way in which, how do I want to phrase this? Not being particularly attentive to the way in which not being particularly attentive to the way in which the frames of reference they're using to make these critiques I'm probably going to back off that point just because I'm realizing I'm not actually confident in what I'm saying. I suppose I'll just say this. In my general limited experience, it seems that a lot of self-identified socialists online are a little bit, don't take seriously the implications of actually fully restructuring at the level of like a paradigm, how your society is put together. Yeah, I don't like how I'm describing that. I'm gonna walk back on that. I'm gonna deny answering I'm gonna not answer that question, or pretend I didn't answer the question. I'm gonna have to think about that one more. But thank you for that. Delvina the Goddess asks, how do I fix my life Sunday and stop with my wicked internet ways of chasing strength and power? And I don't think you can. I think that's just inherent to your spirit, Delvina. It's the curse of being you. I'll ask 3 more and then we'll call it a night. Must Combo asks, do you think PhilosophyTube does some good content? I don't quite remember your videos on her. Right, PhilosophyTube is a her. I should be careful. I almost misgendered her again. That's going to take me a while to get used to. I'm just not going to talk about PhilosophyTube until I've actually internalized that. Just out of habit. PhilosophyTube has... I don't know. I think a lot of her early stuff was decent. Like, in a very lukewarm sense. Like, it wasn't bad. I don't think any of it's been particularly interesting, and in a way I think mediocre philosophy can in some ways be worse than outright bad philosophy, for the simple reason that if you can like generate interest, then somebody will teach themselves. I think one of the biggest problems with public education is that there's an absolute failure to actually get students to be invested in what they're doing. Instead, it's extraordinarily condescending. So, like math textbooks will have like these cheap little cartoon pictures of bubble people. It'll be extraordinarily abstract and compartmentalized, and there's no rhyme or reason to how stuff is actually put together that anybody can see. It seems like a lot of it is a waste of time for a lot of students, and it doesn't just seem that way for a lot of them. It ends up being that way because they're never really made to care enough to actually self-educate, and if really that should be the goal. Somebody who missed school, who missed all of school from like middle school to high school, if you can get them interested in a topic, like really interested in a topic, they will teach themselves. People go back in college, they take high school math, they get into like advanced science degrees. Like it's if you bore somebody, by contrast, if you make somebody think, oh, this is all this is, really? Like you've turned them off of philosophy, and my worry is that that's what PhilosophyTube does. I don't know if that's what she actually does or if she's actually done that, but my general experience of PhilosophyTube is either revulsion or boredom. Revulsion because she has a very, very bad habit, quote unquote, of pretending to give a philosophical lecture while in fact putting on an extraordinarily politically biased and often extraordinarily poorly understood. I mean, I'm not going to get into it, but in that one video, the video I responded to in my video response to PhilosophyTube, there was a point at which she said something completely nonsensical that I didn't include. I don't know why I'm just talking about it now if I'm not going to bring it up, but yeah. But like it's giving a false impression of philosophy as either boring or politically hostile to people who would probably be won over in large measure if they thought that philosophy was particularly amenable to left-wing politics, say, which I think it is in large part. She has some good theater. Like, she's a decent actor. Yeah. I mean, as a third-rate ContraPoints, yeah, I guess she's okay. But I don't really like her. Music Combo asks, President Sunday, have you considered reaching out to Vosh for a conversation on these issues? I don't think Vosh has any particular intention of talking to me at all in the... I mean, like, I don't get the impression like there's any interest there. Yeah, which, I mean, I'm not offended by. He seems to prefer Nazis, so... But, yeah, I mean, I've spoken to Vosh a few times. I don't think anything's going to come of it. Aaron B. Araguen asks, hey, President Sunday, have you seen Paul Vanderklee's channel? He has good conversations between Christians and non-Christians. If you're interested in post-apologetics, I've seen a bit of it. I haven't been particularly interested just because of the circles he's in, which sort of bodes... I'm not, like, trying to say guilt by association, but it doesn't bode well. Do you take the right and left wing seriously, or is it more of a label to mark people you consider the good guys and the bad guys? I think it's I mean, there's obviously a way in which there's obviously like some sort of some limited form of multipolarity in terms of political affiliations, especially like in the United States, where every 4 years people divide specifically on one of two party candidates to run the country. So I mean, to a limited extent, you can sort of divide things into two sides, but I think anything beyond like a mere transient, pragmatic, I don't think it really means a whole lot, left and right wing. I think it's one of those cases where we sort of know it when we see it, but we also kind of don't. All right. Well, it's late. I'm tired. I'm parched as well. Let's call it a night. This was long. Maybe before I go, I haven't streamed in a long time. Mostly because I didn't really know what I was doing, and it was extraordinarily stressful. Guests I would have were on really wonky schedules, so I love having Matt McManus on. He's really interesting, but he always has like a really specific time frame that he can talk to you in, and it's always like he'll get there and it's like, yeah, cool. Hey, so how? I've got 30 minutes. It's like, oh, really? Okay. Or like Clifford Bates is really interesting, but he's also in Poland, so I don't think he's in Poland right now, but it'll be like 9 or 8 p.m. or something where he is, and it'll be like 10 in the morning here, which is kind of awful. But where was I going with this? Right. So if I started doing streams more regularly, what do you guys want? Because I don't want to waste your time. Like I'm not like giving you a blank check to just tell me to do anything, but like just for my edification, so we don't have like an entirely one-sided relationship here. What do you guys want to see from streams? What do you guys enjoy? Like what stuff do you like, just like talking off the cuff like this? The interviews are like really hard to schedule, so I can only like promise those to a limited degree. I've had a lot going on, which is why stuff is slowed down. I'm still trying to keep on schedule. I have another fairly large, I don't know if it's going to be large, but I think it's going to be a very interesting video on chronopolitics and international relations soon. And then I'm hoping that will lead into the final Nationalist, the long delayed final chapter of the Nationalist series. But if you make some videos about Plotinus, that would be sick. Or Lacan too, please, thank you. Okay, I'll tell you what, if I read Lacan and Plotinus in the near future, I'll make videos on them. But I haven't read either of them. So debate streams. I mean, I sort of had like a weird quavering quasi debate with Dario on religion on Chud Logic stream the other day. Was that yesterday? Recently. It's all a blur now. Mouthy Infidel has agreed to debate on whether religion is the enemy of the left, but he has not responded to anything since, so I don't know if that's happening or not. So bug him if you want to see that happen, I suppose. Please debate me on Plotinus. I will... No, I'm not going to debate you on Plotinus. Not yet. I have to go train in the mountains first. Okay. Away with you all. Take care.